Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an incredible honour to be here for this very special occasion. 50 years ago today, MFC was born, the same year that Microsoft sparked a tech revolution. And MFC has proven that it can fund both Thailand's past and its future, from factories to digital frontiers. And I hope going forward, this balance of legacy and innovation will continue to inspire. In 1975, Thailand was a nation of 40 million with just 20% living in cities. Its GDP per capita stood at $2,800, a modest rural economy where over 60% of people scraped by below the poverty line, earning less than $2 a day. Literacy was okay, but only 30% of kids reached secondary school, and higher education was a very rare 3%. This was Thailand before its industrial leap. This may surprise you, but I have a vivid memory of this. I was also born in 1975, like MFC. And as a 5-year-old, I moved to Thailand. And I lived down Suk 31. I remember the floods when it rained. I remember drinking Coke out of a plastic bag. I remember the monks collecting their daily rice and the wet markets and the mad traffic, and I fell in love with this place, and a love that continues to this day. Fast forward to today, and Thailand's now 70 million people enjoy a GDP per capita that's 7 times higher, powered by factories and technology. Poverty is less than 6%. Half the nation now is urbanised. And education's roared ahead, with 50% of young people getting a tertiary education. This is an incredible journey for Thailand. And this rise mirrors that of ASEAN as a whole, a region that was once less than 2% of the global economy, now represents 6.5%, 680 million people. So, as we celebrate MFC's 50th anniversary, Thailand now stands at the dawn of a new era, brimming with opportunity but not without challenge. And as I'll discuss in this talk here, there's a whole new set of arenas that Thailand must muster. And Thailand and ASEAN has a ticket to play, but there's some real question marks to be resolved. Today, you see, we start at a very different point from 1975. Growth won't come easy anymore from urbanisation, from capitalisation, industrialisation, and demographics. Thailand's going to need to build new strengths and overcome skill gaps and the headwinds of ageing. You know, the fertility rate in Thailand, I learned today, is only 1.5. And it's going to have to do all this in an incredibly different geostrategic environment. There was talk before about Nixon coming to Asia and trying to rewrite the geostrategic map of the world, and the same thing is happening again today. So this is Thailand's moment, and maybe MFC's as well, to either seize that future or falter. So it brings me to tonight's presentation. We've recently republished this report. It's reverberated all around the world because it's a topic that's important. And it started when we sought to understand the absolutely remarkable dynamics of the industrial economy in the 2000s. One way of understanding this is to look at the top 10 companies of the world, which, by the way, today make up more than 1/3 of the S&P 500. So these top 10 companies really matter. In 2005, we had a list you'd expect in any industrial economy. You know, makers, financiers, energizers, retailers. You'll notice Microsoft is there, whose birthday was the same as yours. The single tech company. Now, fast forward to 2025, and it's a radically different landscape. Yes, there's been some recent ups and downs in markets, but this does not change the answer. Only Microsoft survived. 9 of the 10 companies are different. And those traditional firms like GE got replaced with giants who are 10 times bigger. They average 2 trillion of market cap, and they represent a whole new set of industries. So something incredible is happening, and it turns out there's no fluke to this industrial logic because they all came from industries we call arenas of competition. Let me tell you a little bit about them. So how do I understand this industrial landscape? Well, let's put it on a map. Here's our map. It's got 2 dimensions. The first dimension, you'll understand. It's easy. Where's the value going? That's across the bottom. Across the side, though, is a different axis, and it's about how much change and dynamism is there. To use our term, what we mean is how quickly are the deck of players getting reshuffled and how many new cards are getting added to the deck. So how fast are these industries changing with new players? So the first set of industries I'll put here are our normal industries. They work on our normal economic playbook. It's like banks and energy companies and manufacturers. In fact, many of the companies that are present in Thailand are in these grey zones. They took a lower share of growth and they showed much less economic dynamism, much less change in their industries. But here's what happened over this period, though. There's a whole new set of industries that emerged. We call them arenas of competition. They played by completely different rules. They include things like software, the cloud, EVs, semiconductors, and of course, internet companies. And even though these industries were only about 10% of corporate revenues, they represented 50% of the growth in market cap. Now, these industries stood apart. They had much faster growth, much more R&D, far greater profitability. You can see that, more than double. Much bigger size. This is the realm of giants. And much more new companies. In these new arenas, 33% of the value came from companies that weren't even playing in 2005. So these are places where they're like nebulas, new companies are formed. Think about Tesla. In 2005, it was a very small startup. So there's something qualitatively different about these arenas. And it's not just different in the where to compete, it's also different in the how to compete. The model of competition in these arenas is different. Let me show you one extremely vivid example, and that is in the realm of investment. So this is just 6 companies, only 6. And yes, these companies have huge valuations and huge profitability, but what you can't forget is that's backed by huge investment, what we call escalation. If you want to play in a new arena, it's a whole different level of competition. Just these 6 companies spent $500 billion in R&D and CapEx last year. To put that in perspective, the Apollo program was about half that in today's dollars, but that was spent over 13 years, not 1. So the level of investment that's happening in these arenas is crazy. And it's one that means you've got to be very serious about can you play this game and are you going to play this game? Because these escalations make competition in these arenas much more like a tournament than traditional day-to-day industrial competition. They fight really hard to win the gold, and it's worth a lot to win the gold medal. But then the Olympics comes by every 4 years, and you have to do it all again. This creates an ever-increasing cycle of investment and scaling that we can see here. Well, this brings us to ASEAN and Thailand. Where did all this happen? If we look at the past 12 arenas, more than 80% of it was about the US and about China. In fact, one analysis I saw recently showed that since 1975, which is a year that comes up a lot tonight for good reasons, the US has generated about 75 new companies that are worth $10 billion or more. 75 new companies worth $10 billion or more. But Europe, over that time, has only created 10. But it's even more extreme when you look at the value. Those new US large companies are worth about 70 times more than the European ones. So there's something going on here that's very special and very new, but also very, very different between locations. And that brings us to ASEAN, which really did not meaningfully participate in this new industrial revolution. You might need to get your magnifying glass out to see the little orange on the side. That's ASEAN. Its companies in the arenas are worth less than 1% of the total. So what does that mean? It means ASEAN, if it's going to play in the next set of arenas, is going to need to do something different than what got it here. What's going to get us there is different than what got us here. Let me repeat my analysis of the top 10 companies. So unlike the global top 10, the ASEAN top 10 companies have not been revolutionised to the same extent. While the global top 10 company expanded its value 8 times, in ASEAN that was just 4 times. And while half of them are new, only 2 come from the new arenas. Now, one part of this is a legacy of state ownership. In 2005, 7 of those companies had strong state involvement on the share register, and this is just 2 now, it's lessened. And certainly there's some world-beating companies. Every bank in the world admires DBS, for example. PT Burrito is helping drive the renewables rollouts. You've got C Limited, you've got Trip.com. But there's no Thai companies, is there? PTT remains the biggest, but at 25 billion doesn't make the top 10 anymore. So let's look forward. Having understood what an arena is and what makes it special, oh dear. If you could advance the slide for me, please, that would be very much appreciated. Having understood why arenas form and what makes them special, we then shifted our sights to the future. What would the next big arenas be by 2040? We started with a long list of 65 industries, but here are the 18 that we ended up with. I'm going to take you through them now. First, the foundation is semiconductors. Moore's law has been going for 5 decades now, and we've seen it, now we see a new era of computation ushered in with AI. That's going to add $2 trillion. Second, we have the continued expansion of the digital economy, which is really still at a midpoint. And this adds e-commerce, advertising, video, and games. This gives us a huge 21 trillion hit of revenue. Next, of course, what everyone's talking about, AI. This will revolutionise how our economies work, and in the meantime add about $7 trillion of new revenue. Now, these are really big numbers. Just to put it in context, by the way, the entire US economy is 30 trillion. Fourth, electrification is a really massive trend. It's a mega trend that will bring another 6 trillion in the form of 4 arenas: EVs, shared autonomous vehicles, batteries, and nuclear power to energise it all. Next, new bio-frontiers. Ozempic and other drugs are already changing our metabolism of entire populations. And when they get cheaper, it's going to unlock enormous industries. Industrial biotech too is on the cusp of solving for new materials. That's another $1 trillion. Finally, we talk a lot about the digital world, but the physical world is going to get invaded too by new arenas. Modular construction will massively impact the way we build and hopefully bring productivity to one of the world's most important industries that has not had productivity. Drones, robots, and spaceships are going to bring a science fiction dream into a reality. And robots in particular are again unlocked by AI, because we've seen in our own lives how AI has mastered language, but it will soon enable the level of dexterity and physical logic that allows robots to be in the real world rather than just in a factory. Add another $3 trillion. So put it all together, I've got these massive numbers. I've got 29 to 48 trillion of revenue. By the way, that translates to 2 to 6 trillion of profit after tax. This would represent 1/3 of all GDP growth over this period. And this is from a collection of industries that today amounts to only 4% of the global economy. That's the thing about arenas. A lot of the industrial action is packed into a small part of the overall economy. You have to choose where to play very wisely. Let's get to the so what for ASEAN and Thailand. There's 2 angles. First is the demand side. Huge TAM. Asia Pacific will be by far the biggest market for these new arenas, up to 21 trillion of revenue, almost twice as much as Europe. Just robotics alone could be a $600 billion market here. And this is where the action is going to be. It's where the customers are. Already, ASEAN, as I mentioned before, has 680 million people, more than double the US. So that's the demand side. What about the supply side? Well, first of all, in really important and competitive global value chains, ASEAN and Thailand have shown that they can step up to the plate. You can see Thailand got more of its market share in the automotive chain, and transitioning this is going to be important. But ASEAN in general has been an incredibly important part of these emerging global value chains. But if we look at where large company revenue is today, and here I'm talking about large companies that are based here, where you control the destiny, it does shift on the simpler side of the economy. This is a chart showing revenues of ASEAN firms of firms that are large enough to have 50 million or more of revenue. There are still arenas to play for here, like, for example, Indonesia's role in the emerging battery economy, but it tells me there's going to have to be a pivot if you're going to play in the right spaces of the future. This is where intentional investment is going to come into play. So let me try and think about this like a strategist. What are the strike zones for you in this market? So I look where you have some industrial base and existing capability first. This is what I call strike zone 1. This gives me 6 arenas that are in play for you. In zone 2, I put in industrial centres and capabilities that are adjacent, where there's some nascent capability and where you can leverage what you have today. This adds another 7. The rest I'm going to put in strike zone 3. I'm not saying they're impossible, but I'm saying they're on trajectories that are a long way away from you and moving very, very fast. So it would be unrealistic to think that you're going to catch up in a lot of these places. But going back to our overall revenue pools, what you can see is strike zone 1 is absolutely massive. So e-commerce is a big part of that, and that operates at a lower margin. But even if I take that out, I still have $7 to $11 trillion of revenue in this strike zone. And just the profit pool in this strike zone alone globally is going to be $3 trillion, up to $3 trillion. If I add zone 2 as well, I've got $4.5 trillion. That's bigger than the entire GDP of ASEAN today. So going back to the present, one thing we learned about arenas when we looked at how they form is they don't start from nothing. Back in 2005, we already had the first Tesla. Toyota had popularized the hybrid with great batteries. Amazon was already a household name. TSMC had well and truly established the foundry model. Netflix had already disrupted video rentals and was about to enter streaming. So today, if Thailand and ASEAN is going to be serious about playing in these arenas, we should see signs of it. So what do we see today? Well, let's have a look at just a few examples. EVs. Thailand is already a growing hub for EV manufacture, but it still remains a node in the network rather than a driver. That's something to think about. Batteries. Indonesia is building Asia's first gigafactory with LG and Hyundai. Semiconductor. Penang's already 5% of global semiconductor exports. Vietnam rising fast. Think about, for example, huge investments from Intel and Amkor in facilities, and Samsung's $3.3 billion R&D centre they're building. Biotech, here in this room, we've got Better Grow, we've got CP Food. They're making big moves in precision fermentation, bio-based animal feed. They're both making really big and important moves in this space. But in Singapore, Turtle Tree, Ento from Malaysia, they're working on synthetic and alternative proteins. E-commerce, ASEAN has a huge e-commerce scene, 460 million internet users. We see players like Shopee, Tokopedia and Tiki doing interesting things. Future air mobility. Malaysia's Aonic is using drones to improve farm productivity. In Singapore, Skyports operates a ship-to-shore delivery service in the port of Jurong. In space, Thailand's active with MuSpace, while Singapore's equatorial space focused on hybrid rockets, and Vietnam's FPT works on Earth observation for agricultural applications. So we have signs of life in these new arenas. We know we need to do a pivot. We know we have the demand. We have the beginnings of the supply. And if something special happens, we'll be able to play a much bigger role in the next set of arenas than we did in the past. So let me wrap up with just three thoughts for you. First of all, as famously quoted, predictions are pretty hard. Of course, the world is going to evolve in unexpected ways, but that should not prevent us from being bold in taking a view. Second, as we've seen, the future arrives unevenly. There are already traces of these new arenas at play today. And if we look and we're creative and we keep an open mind, we're going to find them today. And third, the best way to understand the future is to make the future. And on that note, let me again congratulate MFC on their 50th anniversary and encourage everyone in this room to think boldly about shaping Thailand for the next 50 years and winning in the next big arenas of competition. Thank you.
ถ้าชอบกดไลค์ใช่กดแชร์และอย่าลืมกดติดตามทุกช่องทางของฐานเศรษฐกิจด้วยนะคะ